we have to think about it now. We have to open some doors to experiment, to explore.
Time for Wine Talks with Paul K.
Fascinating story.
This is Robert Mondavi from the Michael Mondavi Winery.
I taste a lot of wine.
Having a conversation with Shark Tank, Kevin O'Leary.
Michael Silacci, Opus One Winery.
Incredible conversation with Dr. Mia Ruth.
No matter what, you're definitely going to feel better.
Sit back and grab a glass. It's Wine Talks with Paul K.
Hey, welcome to Wine Talks with Paul K. And we are in studio today in beautiful Southern California, about to have a conversation with Monsieur Frederic Barnier of Maison Louis Jadot. Introductions in just a moment. Wine Talks, of course, sponsored by the Original Wine of the Month Club, and available on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Pandora, wherever you hang out for your podcasting. Hey, have a listen. I just got done ranting, really upset, actually, about the Wink failure. Not the failure of the business, the failure to the consumer, the people that are consuming their wines, and the rest of us that want to buy some wines. This failure has ripple effects in our industry. I want you to take a listen to that. My first monologue in season 14, as well as the Kladstrup episode, where we talk about their book, Wine and War. It's a fascinating story, needs to be told. Have a listen. But not while we're here today. We're here actually to have a conversation with Monsieur Frederic Barnier. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Good morning.
You are the most. This is the third time, I think. So you're the.
I could live there.
So you're very lucky.
I'm very pleased to be for the first time, the third time here.
Third time. You're the most prolific guest I've had. And we've had, I got 200-something episodes.
You invite me, so I'm coming.
Okay, I appreciate that. I think next time we're going to do it in Burgundy, Beaune downtown, on Centre-Ville, and we're going to.
That's a good idea to do one podcast there. Good idea.
You're the director of winemaking at Maison Louis Jadot.
Yeah, right? I'm the guilty guy.
You're the guy.
the guy in charge of all the vineyards and the winemaking. So I'm in charge with my team, of course, because it's not something you do alone. Just to make sure that all the wines we are producing, from the regional wines, I mean the wines you could buy for a reasonable price, to the Musigny, that the wines are great, so the greatest as possible. So that's the charge I have.
We just tasted the Musigny 2018, and I wanted to pour it at the next wedding, but apparently it's out of stock, and I couldn't afford it anyway, so it doesn't really matter.
Musigny, as you know, it's a very small piece of land we are farming, so it's already a great opportunity to have some taste of it. But yes, it's a very limited production. It's just a part of what is Burgundy, but hopefully for us, Burgundy, we have so many wines more accessible. So to drink.
Well, I think I mentioned it when we were tasting it. It's one of those wines, and many of the wines at Maison Louis Jadot are like this. It's the kind of wine that when I pour them at home or when I give them to a guest, very often a light bulb goes off. Oh, now I get it. You know, what a fine, layered, complex, terroir-driven wine can be like. And that's huge. So how many, for the lay of the land for the listeners, Burgundy is about an hour and a half west of Paris.
Mm-hmm.
And it starts in the north with, let's just start with Chablis, which is, it's actually sort of perpendicular to the main Burgundy Valley.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then we start with what in regular Burgundy for mostly the reds?
Yeah, as you said, you have the Chablis region, which is really on the north part, 1 hour and a half from Paris in direction of south, and you will find the Côte de Nuit wines, where the most of time it's mainly reds which are produced there, with most of the greatest Grand Cru as the Musigny, the Clos de Bèze, the Clos Vougeot, and so on. A little bit southern, you will find the Côte de Beaune, with most of the whites which are produced, with the Montrachet, the Bâtard, all the Puligny, Meursault, Chassagne. And if you go a little bit south, you will find the Côte Chalonnaise, with some nice wines. Original wines, as the Bouzeron, for example, which is the only village wine produced with our Aligoté grape variety. And if you go a little bit southern again, you will find the Mâconnais, with the Pouilly-Fuissé, the Mâcon Village, the Saint-Véran. And not far ago, because that's something, Jadot, we consider that it's part of Burgundy, you will find the Beaujolais region, where we are producing some great wine from Gamay, the Moulin à Vent, the Morgon, some Fleury. So that's really the entire great Burgundy, what we call La Grande Bourgogne for us.
We have a lot to talk about then.
Yeah.
when I look at the price list for the wines, there's 2 pages worth. So how many different appellations, how many different appellations does Louis Jadot bottle from Burgundy? How many
Well,
different?
that's a good question, but I have to be frank. I have never counted, so I have no idea. But well, I think we have a certain diversity. It's true. Maybe more as 100, 120 wines. I don't know exactly, but well, it's a large and diverse production. But in fact, it's what is Burgundy. In Burgundy, it's quite complex. You know it. There is a very different wines from the Macon village, the Bourgogne Chardonnay, to many different villages. All the Premier Crus we are farming and some Grand Crus. So this is the reality of Burgundy. It's our richness. And us, Jadot, we just want to be a window to what is Burgundy. I mean, we are producing what Burgundy is. From the low part of the classification to the top, all the pyramid have to be produced, and it's what we are trying to do. So it's true, it makes a lot of wine, but it's also again our richness and why we are waking up in the morning, because it's so fun to make so many wines.
Okay, that's why I want to come there, and I want a job in the cellar, and I'll do it for free. I just want to get that.
You have to come to help us, because it's not so easy now to hire some people.
No, I know. So, that's what's so fascinating about Burgundy, anyway. I mean, it's just this diverse soil and regions, and they're small regions that create such vastly different wines. We tasted 2 today. The 2 Beaune wines are so dramatically different. But Maison Louis Jadot is from the 1800s, no?
1859, yeah.
So, negociant, the idea that a negociant, which in modern sort of definition would be not a grower, but somebody who has the right to pick and ferment the grapes from a particular place and gets to choose which they do. But it's not really what you do. You don't really choose.
No, a negociant, what we call a negociant is, in the past, it was a producer who was used to buy the wine and to age it and to bottle it. In fact, in the past, if you are looking a few decades ago, part of the producers in Burgundy, they were making the wine for people. They were bottling the wine, aging it, and selling it. It was the negociant. You had the growers on one side and the negociant on the other side. One, they were making the wine. The other wine, they were aging the wines and selling the wines. It was working like that in the past. And Jadot, we were clearly a negociant, so we were used to work with many growers. We are buying the wine. We were aging it, selling it everywhere in the world. But as you know, Burgundy has completely changed the few past years. So maybe the last 20 years have been a great change, a very fast change. Small growers now are very successful. They are making their wines. They have decided to sell it by themselves. So clearly for producers as Jadot, we had to extend our domain just to make sure to get some wines and to continue to sell some. So now, clearly in Burgundy, in fact, we are doing quite the same job. You have small growers which are so successful. They grow, they farm, they do their wine, they sell it, and they are now negociant because they want to extend what they do. So they buy some fruits from other growers. And you have, on the other hand, the negociant as us. We have extended our vineyards. We are now large growers. We are less negociant because, again, at that level of wine, I mean the village, Premier Crus, Grand Crus, we probably produce wine from 90% what is coming from our domain. So, I mean, it's no more negociant at that level of wine. We are growers. So we do exactly the same job, but at different, I would say, levels of volume. We are probably producing more wines, are some small growers, but we are doing exactly the same job.
So 90% of now is owned by Louis Jadot?
Well, at Village, Premier Crus and Grand Crus, yes. If you are looking to what we are selling, the Volnay, Claude Labarre, the Boucherot, the Bouzeron are coming from the domain part. Now we are buying fruits on the Village wines and, of course, mainly on the regional wines for the Macon village, the Bourgogne Chardonnay. But it's more and more difficult to get the fruits, to get the grapes at the Premier Crus level. You know, it's really difficult. So, and we are again, it's a chance we have to have such domain to be able to farm so many Premier Crus and to be, I could say, independent in a certain way.
So what the level of production, Maison Louis Jadot is second, fourth, fifth, first largest producer?
Well, same. I'm not sure to have the good answer, but what is sure is if we are looking to a producer who's making only Burgundy, it's what we do. We are really focusing only in Burgundy. We are probably, yes, one of the largest producer in at that level. Yes.
So why do you think this has changed? It's interesting because it wasn't that long ago you would go to Burgundy, you would visit the small producer, and they'd say, well, you really can't buy the wines. You have to buy them here or there because, we don't sell them. And that sounds like it's changing. Why do you think? Is it the accessibility of the world, through the internet and social networking or whatever, to get their exclusive wines into the hands of the consumer, or they see the profit value to it?
I think it's a mix. I mean, there is a generation of the second generation. The son, the daughter. They have seen that it was possible to make their wines, to play with it, and to be in contact with the world. Because of course, in the past, it was not so easy to travel and to go everywhere in the world to speak about wines. Now, it's easy. So the doors are open everywhere. So clearly, and of course, it's on the same time because there is a demand. The market of wine has completely changed. A few years ago, it was not so easy to sell wines in the world. Now, the Euro market, the US market, have developed a lot the sales of wine, especially the French wines, and some other markets. So there is clearly a big demand. So it's a mix of different things. A new generation of people who are more interested in making their wine. They want to. They don't want to be grower only. They want to be winemaker, to play with it, and to speak about their wines, what they have made by themselves. So they want to make the full, I would say, cycle of wine. So it's a mix, but it's a good mix. It's what makes Burgundy so popular today.
Yeah.
It makes us a little, I would say, in trouble because it's a challenge for us to keep the fruits, to keep the sourcing, and to make sure that in the future we will be able to produce few wines. But well, this is the rules. It's the way it does. Yeah.
Things change, don't they?
Correct.
Is there a larger world wine recognition or awareness of fine Burgundy? Are we seeing that the United States or China or Japan or Germany, Germans, we'll talk about that in a minute, but is there an elevated awareness of Burgundy in the world?
Yeah, clearly yes.
Big time.
Clearly yes, and we know that some of the market are not completely matured. So when they will get it, when they will become really matured, it will be really something different. In US, for example, we are growing everywhere, and clearly the demand again. Burgundy, it's wines. It's a category of wines where people they need to know well what they are drinking because it's a complex category. We are doing many wines. We have all the names, so it takes time. But when the market is matured, people are so crazy about the wine, so they like it's really strong. It's really a loyal market. So US is becoming very, very important. We know that in Asia, the market will develop in the next few years. So we have good times in front of us. Probably.
So the Chinese market, they've always been behind. Let's say the Japanese have learned about fine Scotch and fine wine, and the Japanese are just coming around. I think they just stopped putting Coca-Cola, in Bordeaux. So that's a good thing for them. We're trying to, I mean, and actually Burgundy is such a fascinating part of the world for wine. I mean, as much as I come to your tastings every year to see you, of course, is the geographical education I get while you're going through the list of wines, and that the pamphlet you put out with the notebook with the regions and the circling of the village, it gives you an understanding of what Burgundy is really about. It is so fascinating to learn. And I think that in the future for us in this industry, particularly in the direct-to-consumer industry where people are starting to rely on certain vendors, they want to learn more, that education is really important to tell people, to get them to say what the difference is.
It's clearly part of what we are trying to do on the market. I mean, it's to transmit a certain knowledge, to take the time to educate people, because we know that especially for our wines, which are again probably a complex region of wine, it takes time, and they need to be more confident with what we do, in what we are making, to understand our wines. So we know it. Yes, it's a question of time and education.
You think the history? Burgundy seems to be more protected than any other region in the world when it comes to who can participate, who gets involved. Here you are as this large buyer. The things are shifting. You're growing your own now, a lot of it. And there's stories of Americans who try to come to Burgundy and buy a chateau or buy a vineyard. And there's these ancient laws from the 12th century, the 11th century that says, no, you can't. And people are standing in line to buy these grapes.
Yeah, I think you're right. In a certain way, Burgundy, it's not so easy to arrive in Burgundy and to change everything in buying a plot, a vineyard and so on. So, yeah, in a certain way, that is I would say complex organization we have protect us in a certain way. Yes, probably you're right.
Because I was talking about this book off camera about wine and war and what was going on, and it hit me that in the New World, which Louis Jadot will talk about Oregon in a little bit, is participating in the New World version of wines. Jacques Ladier had a great expression for that. But the history of wine, and let's just take Burgundy for a second, with not only the war, let's just take the war, for instance. The Germans came in, they took the chateau, they stole the wine. All this experience, I think, throughout the world shapes old world wines. In other words, we don't have all that experience here. We have a wonderful opportunity to do whatever we want. We can grow whatever we want. We can taste whatever we want. But for me, it seems like the history of wine includes centuries of difficulties, of understanding, of weather, of soil types, of changes, of the monks, whatever participated in that particular region influences what you do today.
Of course. It's exactly what we are living in Burgundy. You know, this idea of climat, you have probably heard about it, which is now protected by UNESCO in Burgundy. It's exactly this idea. It's not only a place in Burgundy. The wines we do now, it's explained by the 2,000 years of history. As you said, sometimes things which were good, sometimes things which are less good, for different reasons. But of course, yes, this is a very long story which explains what we do now. And that's why sometimes for a part of the new generation, they are very successful today, but they have to remind that the success we have now is clearly a part of what have been made before. So we have to stay very humble with that and just to take care not to be satellites sometimes by what's happening.
That is a tall task.
Yeah,
because it's very hard to project backwards to a younger generation the history and the experience necessary to learn what to do forward. And I have that problem here in my company. I've been doing this for 32 years. I've tasted a lot of wines. I've been through a lot of different emaciations. And only my 32 years, you're talking centuries of history that should be sent backwards or sent forwards to the generations ahead of us to understand, because you're just protecting. And this is what's so interesting about some of the stuff you're doing. Let's just take rootstock experiment for a second. You show an incredible plot.
Yeah, it's a global, I would say, can I say, strategy. We are thinking about it. I mean, in Burgundy, as you know, there is a change. There is a change of the weather. And clearly, it's important to now to think about what we could change to adapt in the future, especially for the next 30, 50 years. And the idea was to start by something easy to understand. Why have not to change? What have not to be changed in Burgundy? And I think that probably what we cannot change is the place where we are in Burgundy. With the Musigny will forever.
You made that point yesterday. I go, yeah, that makes sense.
So Musigny, Claude Bèze won't move. So we have to stay where we are, and that's a big point, because in some other places where the vineyards, where the appellation are less strong, they could move a little. They could explore new hills or new slopes. Less, I would say, not so interesting now, but which could be in the future more interesting. So, Burgundy cannot move. And the second thing we want not to change is the wines. Now the wines are so popular. Everybody is crazy about Burgundy because of the quality of our wines. So we have to save that. And when you have said that, you say, okay, probably everything could change around to make it. I mean, the varietals, the vegetal part, the rootstock, the practicing, the density of plantation, I don't know, and part of winemaking. So what is true, it's we have to think about it now. We have to open some doors to experiment, to explore. And Jadot, we have decided to explore, to be part of it, of course, because it's important. So we have decided to do an experiment with some new rootstock. So we have planted 1.5 hectares of 9 different rootstocks with one clone of Pinot Noir, the 777, which is a very classic one. Just to have an idea of what could be interesting for the future, for example, to delay the bud break, to delay the date of picking, to have a better resistance to the drought, etc., etc. So that's something we have decided to make last year. So it's really a new plot. But to give you an idea, what is crazy. We do it now, and we will probably have the first answers in 10 years.
Yeah, exactly.
So it will take a long time before to have the first, I would say, good answer. So that's why it's so important to start to explore it now.
That's and that was kind of what we were talking about. This generation ahead, the experience of the generations behind, and what you're going to teach the generations ahead. And here you are, planting an experimental vineyard that you may not personally get a chance to know. Maybe you'll be
well,
be over by then.
in Burgundy we have different level of strategy. I mean, we have to explore a few things together. So we have a research program to explore on the varietals, on a few practicing, but also you have your own responsibility as producers. We are, as Louis Jadot, for example, and to make your own idea about such issue. So that's why we have decided to explore it by ourselves, just to make our own experience about using new rootstock. You will have again a global program on it, but it's important, I mean, to make a part of the way alone, just to have again our own feedback about such rootstock.
What is the end game? I mean, let's say you didn't do anything. We know climate's changing. We won't talk about why, but we know it's changing. You can play with the vineyard. You can do what you want. But that one picture you showed yesterday of the bud with the ice on it, that's what you're trying to prevent in the future, so you can have delayed bud break, whatever you're trying to do. But what if you did nothing? What would happen if this trend continues? The end game is to produce what? The best wine we can make from that piece of ground? Is that?
Of course. Again, the end game is really to be able to make the same wine as we do now. I mean, to save the freshness we have in Burgundy, to save this touch of wine which is so specific to our region, to make sure that a Volnay will never be a Pommard, to save a certain moderate richness, because we are not making over rich wine, so we want to make wines which are able to be drunk, every day. So that's a very important point, and that's why it's again we have to stay very open-minded, not to close any door now. The idea today is to put questions on the table. It's not to put answers. We have to explore. We were talking about bud break, for example. I give you my point of view, but as you know, there is now we try to fight this lead frost. We have some time in Burgundy in using some candles, in using some electric cable in the vineyard, in using some fans and many things like that. I'm not sure it's the good idea, because of course if we have this change of the weather, it's probably because we are doing that.
Yes.
So at a certain point, the idea, and for example the rootstock experiment is a good example. The idea is more to explore natural agronomic solutions. And again, if we're able to delay a little bit the bud break, we will be safe. We don't need to use any more candles or something like that. So that's more the idea, to find agronomic solutions.
When you showed that picture yesterday, which is a beautiful picture, I mean, just forget the reason why the picture exists, because you're trying to keep the air warm and circulated so that you wouldn't have frost problems. But all that light and all those flames, and for the listeners, this is a gorgeous picture of these fires burning between the vines to keep the soil. But you're right, maybe that the carbon emission from these flames have something to do with what's going on.
Of course it has. So it's beautiful pictures for Instagram, but but that's it. It's in fact, if you are thinking about it, it's exactly what we are trying to fight. We have this change of the weather because the winter is getting warmer and warmer, because we are producing too much carbon. So So that's not the solution for the future. I understand that we have to fight this lead frost and we have to protect our vineyards. So there is an immediate answer, but it could not be the answer for the future in a long term, I would say, view. So that's why we are more working on agronomic solution, just to make sure that we will be able to produce wines not only for the 2, 3, 5 next years, but for the 50 next years.
Yeah.
So that's a different project.
It's an amazing thought to be able to put effort today to protect something that you won't participate in 50 years from now. The different generations who are going to say, wow, they look back and say, wow, Frederic, pretty sharp guy. He produced some of this stuff. But
We'll see.
yeah, but it sounds like we're going to focus on the vineyard, what the vineyard produces for us. We're not as concerned, and I'm sure there's some changes in the winery as well, but you're trying to produce wines that reflect, and particularly in Burgundy, where they're grown, and you're protecting it by doing these experiments to find the variables that might influence in the vineyard more than it would be in the winery. So which is what it's about, right? So
Well, I think it's probably both. We have to take care that we could talk about the vineyards part, of course. So as we said, you have the varietals, you have the rootstock, the practicing, and so many topics to explore. But there is also a topic about the wine. I mean, the winemaking have to adapt. I give you another example. Louis Jadot, we are updating our pressing room, for example. When you were used to pick end of September, the weather was quite cool, fresh outside. The sun was not so much shining, so it was not a problem to press outside. Now you are picking most of time end of August. The weather is quite warm. You are picking in the afternoon. The fruits are warm, so you need to adapt. So it's a good example. So we are updating our pressing room, for example. We are building a big fridge to storage our fruits, to just to press the morning after the afternoon picking, protected from the sun and so on. So you see, the winemaking have to adapt also, because of course we will have probably a few issues about winemaking, aging, for example, stability of our wines, which could be a little bit different as what we have now. So I think it's really both. We need to think about making good fruits, because no good wine without good fruits.
yeah, that's true.
But of course, there is a point in the cellar. We have to adapt the way to make our wines, maybe in the way we are aging it. If we are picking maybe a little bit earlier, why not aging the wines a little bit shorter? It could be another issue, for example. So again, we are exploring few things, and we have to open doors now, not to close any door, and we will see. I don't know exactly what we will do in the future, but we are thinking about it.
So much to learn. I mean,
Yeah,
every vintage, you only get one chance a year, right? To learn something.
Yeah, and you know what?
It's pretty slow.
In fact, you have to be confident, and that's the idea. We accept many things. We are working with Mother Nature. We are not controlling everything. So that's why, again, the idea to fight what Mother Nature is giving us, it's not the good idea. We have to make with it, to deal with it, and to adapt. And yes, we try, we experiment. It's and part of my job is to make sure that we do it with a certain control, because we have to be good in the bottle at the end. But we have to be confident. I'm optimistic. So
What do the monks do when they?
of course, the
have
monks,
time.
the monks have done something we have probably lost in a certain way. They observed. You see what I mean? They have observed. They have just had a look. They had some time. It's true that today nobody has time, but they had time. They had so many times. So they had just to do that. So, and they have just observed. They had a look, and they said, okay, here you are making this wine. Here it's not the same. So we will put a wall here. We will do that. We will do that. And today we have to be back to that. We have to be back to observation, to have a look, to take the time to understand better, to experiment, to explore. So it's difficult, because it's not very fashion to take the time now, but we have to be back to it.
It's sort of. I mean, isn't that what, for sure, biodynamic farming is about? But organic farming, where you almost assign a number of vines to a person to make sure they're observing, because you don't have the opportunity to use other methods to fix that. And so sometimes it seems to me what's old is new again. And when I talk about the millennials, let's just take today's consumer climate. The millennials don't drink much wine. They drink White Claw, that. Then I don't understand why, because they're worried about sustainability, biodynamic, organic foods, but then they drink seltzer that's made with artificial flavors and junk. So that part's confusing me. But
Yes, but about that, I mean, it's my point of view. It's a problem of education. Education has disappeared. We don't transmit so often our knowledge to our children because again, we don't take the time to educate them to transmit something. And wine today, it's something which is belongs to the old school. The very young people, they said, okay, it becomes to the parents' world. So but on the same time, we have to take the time to explain that yes, it is a part of our education and what has made us, but it's also a very funny part because there is so many things to know about wines, and it's not only a beverage; it's something so much complex behind the label. So, but it's again a question of time.
I'm optimistic.
Yeah, we have to.
I'm optimistic in this that eventually, much like really tasting the Mussini this morning, there's something different about it, so different about it that it makes you stop. And I'm educated, semi-educated in this industry, but even a wine like that stops you in your tracks and makes you go, there's something very different about what's going on here. And so my optimism is about that one day, no matter what the generations behind us are drinking fashionably, like tonight I'm having dinner with a family that's just created this incredible canned cocktail. For me, making a Manhattan or a martini is part of the ritual of having a good Manhattan or martini, like making good wine is a ritual. But I think eventually everybody comes to the table eventually and has that moment that they taste something that alerts them to the idea that it's not just a beverage of alcohol. Like, for instance, what very concerns me very much, not concerns me, but it just is laughable almost to the extent that there's low-calorie, low-alcohol wines. And I try to show people that if that bottle of wine, which is 750 milliliters, is 14% alcohol, and if they buy a wine which tastes horrible at 11% alcohol, that they're really saving what 2-3 milliliters of alcohol. There's nothing. There's no value to that.
No.
Not to sacrifice what I think is what a good glass of wine should be. Right. That's what we're trying to do.
Especially when you are talking about a Mussini.
Yeah. Yeah. Point to that. That's the wrong example, probably. But I was thinking about this because I was reading this book that's telling about wine and war, and they were talking about the 1940 vintage, how horrible it was.
Yeah.
And it was nothing. Apparently, there was just hardly any berries, and I don't know if. And this is part of that whole influence of wine and the history of wine. Like, for instance, the same book talks about the phosphorus tank shells that landed in Champagne and destroyed some of the vineyards forever, that they contaminated the soil. So here there's Burgundians. They've got the 1940s. It's wartime. They got nothing to pick. How did they deal with this? Did they just look at it and say, oh well, I'll try it next year? Or did they think ahead? Do you know if they were thinking ahead?
The wine industry and the wine business, if I could say that, at that time was not what it is now. I mean, you have to remember that at that time, wine, the people they were, Burgundy was not so successful. So they were making wine sometimes. They were making good vintage, bad vintages. Sometimes some fruit, sometimes nothing. It was like that. It's not. It's unbelievable. It's completely unbelievable to imagine that now, because we are producing wines every year. We are making some fruits every year, sometimes less, like the 21 vintage. But at that time, it was not the same. And I imagine that 40 is probably an example of they have accepted to pick nothing. It's But again, it was not so rare at that time.
But do you think that it was climate controlled, that there was a political problem with the climate, or they just looked at it and said, yeah, it was a bad year?
Yeah.
I mean,
they were in the acceptation again. They were really accepted what they get.
Right.
It was the way. It was the way. Now we don't accept anymore. We try to control, but it's probably why we are in trouble now.
Yeah. Well, we're not too much trouble.
Yeah.
What would you say to somebody that wants to learn about Burgundy, that wants to start, someplace, and it's it's not an inexpensive hobby. It's an expensive hobby to learn about Burgundy and to understand it. But how do we educate the consumer to start with the village wines or read?
Well, I will probably advise to start with the regional wines. I mean, the people they have to know that there is still a part which is very very accessible in Burgundy, and probably which represents what Burgundy is for the largest part. I mean, 55% of the wines produced in Burgundy are regionals, like Bourgogne, Macon Village, Pouilly-Fuissé, and so on. So I think that they have to start with that because first they have the touch of the Pinot Noir and Chardonnay from Burgundy. They have very accessible wines, and it's really they prepare their palate for the next step. In fact, we have to respect the pyramid of wines we are producing in Burgundy, the regional wines, then the village wines, then the Premier Crus, and of course, if you are really interested and quite rich, you could buy some Grand Cru. So yeah, it's the introduction to Burgundy really could be the Bourgogne Chardonnay and Bourgogne Pinot Noir, Macon Village, and so on, because that's the way to understand what Burgundy is in terms of taste, in terms of balance, and to understand what we are producing with our Pinot Noir and Chardonnay on a such level.
We can get a pretty good indication from entry-level Burgundy, a village,
For sure.
Compared to, let's just say, a California Pinot Noir, that we're going to know the difference when we taste them in the glass. Because I've noticed on my tastings on Tuesdays that many of the entry-level Burgundies from other producers as well, they're elevated. They're better than they were 5 years ago. They're better than they were 10 years ago. There's actually I taste them. I go, gee, this is. I had a fun. Just buy some. I just bought some from somebody for somebody. I had not tasted it, but he had tasted it, and it's like $20.
Yeah, I think again, now the change of the weather probably help us to have better fruits and a nice ripeness. And again, there is a generation of people who know that we have to make good wines. They are probably more involved in the cellar and more exigent in what they do in the cellar and in the vineyard. But I agree. Probably the success of Burgundy could be explained by the fact that today the wines have never been so good as now. So we are happy with that. And again, we have to remind and to make people confident with Burgundy about the fact that there is still a part which is very accessible in Burgundy. Musigny, the top Grand Crus, and some of the Grand Crus, of course, start to be difficult to get, and the prices are really, really high. But of course, there is still a part of Burgundy which is very, very easy to drink and more accessible with some villages, small Premier Crus, and the regional wines. And they are good. They are good wines.
There's just for the listeners, the highest elevation of designation in Burgundy is Grand Cru, and then there's Premier Cru, and then the Village wines, and then as we head south to Beaujolais. I don't want to get there yet. I want to stop in Beaune just for a second. In this book I was reading, the president of the Vichy, or the president, or whatever you want to call him, the prime minister, was Pétain, and then the Beaune de Hospice de Beaune dedicated a vineyard to him. Does that still exist?
No.
Oh, they took it away.
There is no more cuvée. No.
That's funny. But tell me about the hospice. It's a very fabulous place we visited.
Yeah, well, as you know, we have an hospital, and this hospital they have I would say built a nice vineyards, because some people they gave us a piece of land. So they are organizing every year the third Sunday of November, very famous wine auction. So they do the wine, and they sell the full crop, the full production of the year by auction in November. So it's a very special moment. This is the most famous wine auction in the world. Now they are farming a little bit more, 60 hectares, if I remember well. So last year they have sold 800 barrels of wine, white and red. So it's incredible for the hospital, and of course it's for charity. It's a really nice auction.
It's a very old tradition.
This is the oldest one. Now they are probably 150 years old, something like that. So or 160 if I remember well. So it's a very old tradition. Yes,
it's a bucket list item for me.
Yeah,
just
and
to go to the.
in Burgundy, we are really our Christmas tree. It's not in Christmas. It's really the wine auction
Wow.
from in November. It's really finish the season for us. We have the bud break. We are picking in September or in August now, and we have this auction which really make the end of the year. So the New Year evening, it's the third Sunday of November. After this wine auction, Burgundy, it's getting more quiet, and people are leaving the bone, and we are sleeping a little during the winter. Yeah.
How's the? I suppose the food is
Yeah.
incredible at that event. Okay, we're gonna go south to Beaujolais a little bit because Maison Louis Jadot has a property there, Chateau des Jacques. One of my favorite wines is the Morgon, the Côte de Pie, from that place. And every time I pour that wine somewhere, people like, whoa, what is this? But Beaujolais doesn't have it seems to be getting its mystique back. I've been tasting a lot of organic and biodynamic Beaujolais lately that have a lot of character, that have a lot of complexity. But for a while there, it kind of got beat up. In fact, your ambassador, Monsieur Cerise, used to show a menu of a restaurant in Dijon or Lyon that showed that some of the Beaujolais was more expensive than the Burgundy.
Yeah, in the past, clearly, Moulin à Vent was a very respectful wine. I mean, it was a very important wine, very well-known wine. And some of the Crus du Beaujolais, they were probably more important and more expensive as some of the wines of the Côte d'Or. It has completely changed the last past years, but for sure, it is. We know that we are able to produce beautiful wines from the Gamay and with the granitic soil, with the same philosophy as we do in Côte d'Or. I mean, revealing a place, making a wine which is able to reveal the vintage, the place, and able to be aged. And yes, it's as you said, it's a wine. You can put this wine in a glass and you taste it blind, and you say, "Whoa, what is it?" It's a great wine, and nobody imagined that it could be a Cru du Beaujolais. So we know we are so happy to produce wines there. We know, and we believe in it. But it's still sometimes challenging to push it because some of the people they don't know so well the place. But yes, we know it. It's great wines.
I also poured that at my daughter's wedding.
Wow.
Yeah.
Congrats.
But interesting, I still talk about this to a lot of people that come and taste wine with me, and that is, we visited a few years ago, and Cyrus took us downstairs, and what he'd done that I had never experienced before is that we actually had the soil that the Boulan-Avant or the other districts had, and we were able to like put your hand in it and maybe even smell the soil and start to connect the wine with the soil. And now you have a new winemaker there.
Yeah, we have a new winemaker because Cyril left for another project. So we have a young lady, Julie, who is just arrived at the beginning of January. So it will be a new, I would say, a new project.
First female winemaker, Louis Jadot?
No, I have my assistant Amandine, who is taking care of the cellar in Beaune, is a female. So and Audrey is taking care of the Menferré also. So no, the world of wine now is really more open, and we have many ladies in winemakers in the business. So which is good because it's a mix.
Well, I've done a lot of podcasting lately with women in wine, and I'm going to Napa next week. First thing I'm gonna do is I probably have 3 podcasts to do, and they're all females, as well as people of color. There's in America anyway. There's I don't know, the barrier. There's a barrier. Not sure how it got there, but there seems to be a barrier, and part of it's probably the aristocracy of wine versus just the actual physical ability to get involved with it. But it's a very important issue in America, and I'm wondering if in France, if the awareness is high, like we want to make sure that are including women and including people of color into the winemaking process or distribution, or whatever.
Well, I think it's probably in fact it's natural. It's made naturally in Burgundy. If I have a look to the team, for example, in Beaune, all my team in Beaune are females, or most of them. It's not because we are looking for them,
right.
Especially it's just because they are the best. And when you hire someone, you are looking for the best as possible. And so now it's natural, and you have You have workers in the vineyards. You have drivers in our tractors. You have people in the cellars, which are female everywhere. So it's made naturally in France. Honestly.
Well, they have better palates than we do,
Yeah, they taste.
That's
Of course,
we being men.
they taste well, but as we do, we have to say it. We have, but well, no, it's really made naturally.
That's good to hear. Because it's not. I'm not going to say it's politically charged. It is political. There are advocates. There was one woman I interviewed. She's from the East Coast, who's actually looking at restructuring the way wineries work. Not obviously, fermenting wine, but as far as the ownership is concerned, making it more accessible for people to be part of that. Rewarding those people that stick around to participate in the growth of the company. It's a different model completely, and it's very fascinating. I can't wait to see its success that would be applied into other industries as well. But it's more of a it's a group effort to produce the best product from a group of people's opinions all involved. The hierarchy doesn't exist, the regular hierarchy, which is kind of interesting. We're already at 45 minutes. I know you have to get to the east side the west side to have lunch, but I'm going to do this again. I think we did this once before. My friend, Dr. Murray, medicine is the best, wine is the best medicine.
Yeah, I agree with that.
He was legit MD, a medical doctor in France. He was also a homeopathic doctor in France. This book was translated to English, but what it is a bunch of human maladies and the potential either symptom relief or cure through wine. So, it's very interesting because during this book, and we were talking about a little bit this Wine and War book, they talk about how wine was used to inspire the troops. Like they were given wine as part of their rations almost. And both on the German and the French side, like that was their reward. And I thought to myself, man, I'm in the trenches here, and I've got a bottle of Burgundy. I'm just having a good time.
Well, it's something I'm used to say. The wines of Burgundy, we love it because it doesn't make you so different. It makes you better especially after a better of wine. So that's the big point. And the wines of Burgundy, we are lucky with that because they have a certain lightness. You have this balance again, which make you a better man after a glass of wine, which is different after a big glass of big red. You are not exactly the same.
So if I have two glasses, I'm twice as good as I was before. So here's the malady. We're gonna go with weight loss. Like if you want to lose weight, you could have a dry champagne, a Saint-Emilion, or a Côte de Beaune. And there's also a dosage that goes with this.
I will take the Côte de Beaune white.
See, I kind of set
a Meursault, a nice Meursault.
I kind of set you up.
Yeah.
It is the Côte de Beaune. How much do we think we should drink if we're gonna lose weight with a Côte de Beaune?
If you a bottle,
well,
especially if you are alone.
Actually, I think that's accurate.
Good. You have to be reasonable. A glass, yes.
Here it is. Excess weight often continues to a true infirmity that contributes in larger part towards ruining the life of the person suffering from it. He's very eloquent, this doctor. It says 1 bottle per day. It's not bad,
okay.
Huh?
It's not bad.
Maybe I'll have to gain some weight just to lose some weight.
From a good Meursault, it could be a nice idea.
Yeah, exactly. Well, the Meursault we had today was gorgeous. It also says here for old age.
Alors maybe a red.
Red wines from the Corton region.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I agree because red because of the tannins, so the antioxidants which are present in the wine. So 2 glasses of red wine per day, and you will never die.
It says, lastly, wine is a tonic for the elderly. Plato himself was the opinion that wine, both as a sacrament and a relaxant for men of old age, was given to them by the gods.
And the wines from the Beaujolais with the Gamay grape variety are very rich with antioxidant, the resveratrol. Yeah, so you can drink it for the anti-age. It works very well.
I'm convinced.
Yeah.
I'm going to start tonight.
Good.
It's been a great pleasure having you here again.
Thank
And
you,
I do
Paul.
hope that the next time we do this, it's in Bonn.
Hey, good idea.
Yeah, right? We'll come
Hey.
see you.
Thank you.
Cheers.